Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we've been able to get breaking news from all over the world once again, as Israeli forces have opened fire conducting airstrikes on Yemeni Houthi forces within the area of Houthi-controlled western Yemen, as major airstrikes are now hitting the port of Hudaydah and other targets throughout the country, as the Israeli armed forces have made it incredibly clear that this is the beginning of hostile air actions by the Israeli Air Force, and not only that, future actions are also planned against Hamas and Hezbollah by the Israeli Defense Forces, stating that they will be invading and indefinitely holding the area of the Gaza Strip due to the incidents that have happened and the lack of the release of hostages by the Hamas proxy group of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Meanwhile, the U.S. armed forces have also been conducting airstrikes in the area of Deir ez-Zor today against militant forces that have been building up in the region as the United States of America continues to slowly withdraw its troops from the former Republic of Syria. Meanwhile, we also have been able to hear of a major ammunition fire that has occurred underground in the area of Iran near to the city of Kazarun, as an ammunition explosion, part of a brigade that is tasked with the purpose of securing and protecting a large amount of Iran's munitions, appears to have detonated underground, causing significant amounts of smoke and fire above the underground bunker complex, once again showing us that there is a significant amount of these similar incidents that are happening throughout the entirety of the Islamic Republic. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan has also fired off a missile today, a first of its kind, that is a brand new air defense missile system capable of reaching a range of around 120 kilometers, a direct threat to the Republic of India that any such long-range missile and airstrikes may prove to be unsuccessful if attempted. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear inside the Russian Federation that armed action is once again occurring within the region of Dagestan, as Russian Federation security forces have taken a high amount of casualties, and at this moment firefights are still breaking out throughout the area of Dagestan at this point. Meanwhile, further on up and into the area of the Russian Federation itself, we were able to see that near the city of Voronezh, new reinforcements are being moved in by the Russian Federation to continue to support and prop up the Russian armed forces inside of Ukraine, but it appears that armored vehicles are running out quite significantly, as it appears that all tanks being moved into theater at this point are some variant of a T-62 main battle tank. The Ukrainian armed forces have also opened up a new offensive inside the Kursk Oblast, attempting to encircle the city of Tetkino. We have also been able to see video footage corroborating that evidence, once again leading us to know without a shadow of a doubt that the Ukrainian armed forces have no plans of leaving the Kursk Oblast anytime soon. And we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation has canceled their May 9th Victory Day parade within the port of Sevastopol and occupied Crimea. We have a massive amount of news, and of course those are all the big ticket items of the day, but getting on into each of them in detail, we were able to hear inside of the area of western Yemen that Israeli armed forces and Israeli air forces have been striking multiple targets throughout the area of Houthi-controlled Yemen, as Israeli air forces conduct strikes in Yemen in retaliation for the Houthi ballistic missile attack on the Ben Gurion airport on Sunday, according to Israeli officials. We were able to see that the Israelis have targeted some of the usual suspects that we've seen that the U.S. Armed Forces, the U.S. Navy, and Air Force have been conducting airstrikes on for over the course of a couple of months at this point. Most particularly, we were able to see the Israeli forces conducted airstrikes on Hudaydah, one of the major ports that the Yemeni Houthis control. This port is quite significant, and the ability that it allows for the Islamic Republic, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of the Islamic Republic of Iran to continue to resupply and support the Yemeni Houthis while they continue their hostile actions against the government of Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. Armed Forces further out at sea. We have been able to see that airstrikes apparently have been hitting this port quite significantly just in the short while ago, as reports of heavy airstrikes currently against the port of Hudaydah in the Houthi-controlled areas of western Yemen is underway, possibly conducted by the Israeli Air Force. Considering that this information came out at the exact time that the Israelis announced that they were conducting airstrikes inside of the area, it is most likely highly likely that this was an Israeli Air Force action and not that of the United States Navy or the United States Air Force. However, we have also been able to hear that the Israelis are apparently ramping up their actions militarily against the proxy forces that exist in large throughout the region, supported and directly funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran. These include, of course, the factions of Hezbollah and Hamas, Hamas, Hezbollah being found mostly throughout the entirety of Lebanon, and Hamas largely being found throughout the entire regions of Palestine, the West Bank, and Gaza, but most primarily the Gaza Strip in its large entirety. The Israelis have stated that they will be attempting to take and hold the area of the Gaza Strip indefinitely, and we have also been able to hear that Netanyahu stated that it will be intensive. It appears that the Israelis will now be conducting some sort of a military occupation of the Gaza Strip for an incredibly long period of time, where they will attempt to find, locate, and destroy any Hamas cells that were able to survive the initial invasion by the Israelis several months ago at this point. The Israeli armed forces have been ramping up to conduct military action not only against Hamas, but also Hezbollah once more, and possibly the Syrians in the future, as the conflict in between the Jelani government and the Druze has still continued on at this point. The Israelis find themselves in a fairly difficult situation, and of course a highly unstable Middle East, largely due to Iranian involvement in most of these areas, but nevertheless it appears that the Israelis are going to be attempting to once again draw up more battle plans and war plans, and simply continue to execute them until the problem ceases to exist, which as far as we know, it doesn't really appear that it's going to be ceasing to exist anytime incredibly soon. This has been going on for about 40 years at this point, but eventually it most likely will end up ceasing, and the Israelis and the United States will be able to claim victory in the region for both of their collective interest concerns. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Forces have also been conducting airstrikes around the area of Deir ez-Zor on the Euphrates River inside of Syria, as we were able to hear and see that airstrikes were being conducted as intense U.S. air presence was spotted this morning over eastern Deir ez-Zor, and a footage of an A-10 Thunderbolt and an Apache attack helicopter operating in the region was seen, which we can see in this clip right here. We see the A-10 Warthog coming on in. We can actually see that it has a very interesting loadout. We can't really see most of the pylons, but we can see that the farthest most left-wing pylon actually is mounted to be carrying most likely AIM-9Ls or an AIM-9Xs for the A-10 to be able to use in a limited air defense role. Beyond that, we don't really see a lot of additional air-to-ground ordnance being mounted on board the aircraft, meaning that it may be an incredibly light A-10, most likely using the gun and also just the missiles for air defense, but a very interesting thing to see, nevertheless. We then see the A-10 flying out of view and now conducting an orbit. The aircraft continues to fly off into the distance. And finally, we can also see the AH-64 Apache that was also in the area as well. It does appear that U.S. Armed Forces presence still exists within the area of Deir ez-Zor, or along the line of contact between the former Syrian Arab Republic and that of the Syrian Democratic Forces in the northeastern region of the country, and we have not gotten an official statement yet from the U.S. Department of Defense explaining the exact actions that the U.S. Armed Forces have been conducting around Deir ez-Zor, not just today, but several days ago, as we have been able to hear that the U.S. Armed Forces have continued up a significant tempo of airstrikes and actions within the area against some hostile force. We are actually unsure which hostile force this would be, and if we're actually attacking directly the Jelani government's Harir Tahrir al-Sham troops within the region, but nevertheless, we are largely only open to conjecture and ideas or theories at this point, because we do not have any concrete evidence as to what the U.S. Armed Forces are actually attacking within the area of Deir ez-Zor for multiple days in a row at this point. But it appears that there is a very interesting string of occurrences that have been happening inside the Islamic Republic of Iran. Whether we're speaking about strikes or not, one thing has become fairly clear over the past week is that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been having a very large amount of the weird misfortunes that have been happening. Of course, many will know that the port of Rajay, which is the only major intermodal port in the entirety of the country, suffered a significant explosion due to a mishandling or a direct sabotage of Chinese solid rocket propellants that were at the port. The explosion was so large that it has cost billions of dollars in damage to the port facilities, and also goods that were lost in the subsequent explosion as well. We have then been able to hear after that there was a major gunpowder factory in Isfahan that exploded, killing several dozen people. Moving on from that, we were able to hear of major fires that continue to break out in Tehran, and not only that, a major fire that broke out at the Montazergaim power plant inside the area of the city of Karaj. We then were able to hear that a major fire broke out just yesterday in Mashhad, and not only that, we were also able to hear of additional fires and incidents breaking out throughout Tehran in District 22. There has been a large amount of incidences where high-profile items or features have been dealing with some large workplace accidents, to put it in that way, or largely some sorts of acts of sabotage, which we're not really sure which one it is. But near to the area of the city of Kazran, we were able to hear that an ammo explosion did occur underground as a part of the Iranian Imam Sajjad Commando Brigade, and it appears that some sort of an underground ammunition bunker that they have on the facility has exploded and caught fire. We are able to see the smoke and some of the remnants of the explosion from above ground, but once again, it's another higher profile sort of a target, if we want to call it that, that has ended up catching on fire and spontaneously combusting over the course of the last week, and we can see that in the clip right here. You see them zooming in and taking a little bit of a better look. Of course, the smoke is not as significant as it would be if the explosion was above ground. This smoke is actually venting through cracks from underground, from a bunker, which is giving us an idea that this is only giving us a mere glimpse of what really happened underground. Nevertheless, it is another explosion that occurred within the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it is making it quite clear that something may be a little bit more sinister going on inside the country. Of course, accidents do happen, and we have always accounted for those in the past, but the fact that the Iranians are having an accident of a major scale almost every day in some different facet and some different aspect of their country, while that's never really been the case over an entire year and a half, is starting to lead us to believe that there is a direct foreign involvement that is involved in this. Possibly the United States or Israel are conducting covert sabotage attacks throughout the entirety of the Islamic Republic of Iran to weaken their abilities economically and militarily, and possibly soften their position in current negotiating attempts, although those negotiation attempts appear to have already failed, and the United States has now moved back into providing an ultimatum to Iran that they have to conduct a complete denuclearization, or they will most likely suffer direct U.S. armed military action as a result of their non-compliance. Meanwhile, moving on outside of the Islamic Republic of Iran and on into the region of India and Pakistan, we are still hearing that the Pakistanis are believing that the Indians are going to start conducting major attacks along the line of contact, attempting to target and destroy Pakistani forces that had built up in the area over the past few weeks. We have also been able to hear that the Pakistanis did test fire a missile today called the Fada series surface-to-surface missile with a 120-kilometer range during exercise Indus. Some are saying, like Polymark and Intel, that this is a direct threat to Israel, but one thing that is quite interesting about this is that this missile is called a Fada, which the Fada is actually an armed militant group that has engaged in combat with the Israelis historically far in the past, so I'm not really sure where they got the design idea for this rocket. It may be that it is somewhat Hamas-inspired. It technically is a surface-to-surface missile, and it only has a 120-kilometer range, which is kind of far. It's about 70 miles, but that's not insanely far. It's not like an ATACMS or anything along those lines. It's just slightly a little bit farther range than a GM-LRS from an M240 HIMARS or an M270, so it is a little bit not that much of a warning, I'd say, but it was an interesting thing to see that they did test fire the missile today. I also see the impact right there. Once again, not really an incredibly large impact, so is it really a warning? It's not like the Republic of India would be completely devastated or destroyed by a missile launch like this. And we also do not know about its targeting systems or how precise that missile really is, percentage-wise, over most of its test firings. But this is the first test firing of its type, meaning that if a war actually did break out currently between Pakistan and India, this missile is still a good ways away from actually being used in combat, most likely months at this point, meaning that they would still be waiting to actually deploy this thing even if a war began in just the next few days. Moving on from that though, and out of the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent, it is time for us to move on up into the area of Eastern Europe, as we have been able to hear of some decently interesting developments that have been happening in this area today. The most major development of them all being that the Ukrainian armed forces have opened up a brand new offensive around the area of Tetkino inside the Kursk Oblast. This actually came directly from a Russian military blogger, and the Russian military blogger did state that the Ukrainians had launched a new offensive in the Kursk region, trying to cut off Tetkino. At night, the enemy blew up bridges with rockets, and in the morning sent armored groups into the attack. First, mine-clearing vehicles such as BREMs began to make passages in the minefields, and they were followed by armored vehicles with troops. There is heavy fighting on the border. It appears that the VDV is actually the unit responsible for the defense of the Tetkino region at this point, and other units are supposedly destroying the Ukrainians. Some of the enemy's equipment has already been burned, and then they stated that there was all the information that they had at this point, and more details were going to be coming soon. Video footage emerged about 1 hour later showing that a BREM armored vehicle was able to break through. We were able to see it running in a loop here. I'm not exactly sure why, but we could see that the BREM easily made it through the Dragon's Teeth and into the other side, which is giving us a large idea that the Ukrainians had breached the border at this point, possibly in multiple areas around Tetkino, and they're now going to be conducting an offensive to try and take the border town and possibly push farther beyond it. The Ukrainians appear to be conducting delaying efforts or largely diversionary strategies by employing offensives into the Belgorod, Kursk regions without any large involvement or an attempt to conduct a major offensive. Specifically, all the Ukrainians appear to be attempting to achieve, even with this new offensive inside the Kursk Oblast, is to largely take the land, hold it, and simply force the Russians to keep a major defensive or build up an offensive force to be able to drive the Ukrainians out. This in turn stops the Russian Federation from deploying tens of thousands of Russian soldiers onto other front lines where they could be more so needed, which helps the Ukrainians to be able to conduct more successful defensive efforts on most of the major front lines inside of Ukraine itself, which once again, this idea or theory has largely been sound and proven. Since the Ukrainians have conducted the offensives inside of the Kursk Oblast, the Belgorod Oblast, and the new Tetkino offensive, once again inside the Kursk Oblast, the Ukrainian armed forces have seen that the Russian Federation's ability to rotate units in and out of the active front line and thus increase their combat efficiency has decreased. That is why we have seen in most areas that if there is any Russian advances to be had, they are fairly small and operate at a wildly slow pace. And for these reasons, the Ukrainians seem to have invested heavily and put a lot of eggs in the basket of the idea that if they continue to divert Russian forces away from the Ukrainian front lines and into Russia itself, that will continue to improve the Ukrainian situation defensively on the major front lines and ensure that the Russians will not be able to achieve anything close to their combat objectives, even over the span of years from this point at the time of this coverage of this news right now. But moving on out of that news and on into the Russian Federation itself, while the Ukrainians are continuously conducting diversionary tactics and efforts, we have been able to see that Russian tanks, at least modern main battle tanks, are still running out. The Russian Federation has been having a major shortage of main battle tanks as the war has continued on. Largely both sides, outside of Western intervention in Ukraine, has seen that there has been a major shortage of their modern Soviet-era main battle tanks or main battle tank designs as the war has now entered its fourth year. The Russian Federation has started to completely run out of T-80s, T-90s, and T-72s, which are the major backbone of the modern Russian Federation's armed forces and their armored abilities. The Russian Federation has had to start pulling on older series of the T-72s, such as the T-72A and some lightly modified versions of a T-72AB, which largely is still just a T-72A, but with some Contact 1 added on. But nevertheless, the Russian Federation has even started to run out of those almost completely as well. And this means that the Russian Federation is having to dig deeper and deeper into their supply caches to be able to find anything that would be remotely usable, leading the Russians to field T-62Ms. T-62Ms have been in production, and I want to make sure that we get the dates correct here, from 1961 to 1975, making even the youngest version of this tank around 50 years old at this point. This video was taken just north of Voronezh, and it is showing us that a Russian train is bringing in approximately 70 T-62s, which is equivalent to about an entire battalion's worth of T-62s. They are wildly archaic. T-62s, by all standards, including the standards of the war in Ukraine, are absolutely obsolete and are not able to account for modern frontline fighting conditions. Beyond using a T-62 as an indirect fire weapon, or largely a different form of artillery, T-62s pose absolutely no actual strategic or tactical value on the battlefield for the Russian Federation so far in the war. Nevertheless, it does show that they have run out entirely of modern main battle tanks, and for this reason, they are having to pull on quite literally ancient main battle tanks from the earlier time of the post-World War II Soviet Union to be able to try and even keep their armored forces with tanks at all. Beyond that, they would not have a single tank in the Russian armed forces at this point, or they would start running out rapidly as the Ukrainians are continuing to instill dozens of losses over the course of each week onto the Russian armored forces, which seem at this point to be irreplaceable losses. And this is also coming as the Russian Federation is still dealing with internal issues at home, as we have been able to hear of the major outbreaks of firefights in the area of the town of Matkachkala, which is a very hard name for me to pronounce, and I know I got that wrong. We were able to hear that this morning firefights broke out inside the town. 3 Russian security officers have been killed. One of the gunmen has also been killed, but it does appear that there's been another breakout of insurgents inside the region that the Russians will have to send more resources and personnel to attempt to deal with before it starts to spiral rapidly out of control like it did nearly a year ago, about at the same time last year. You see everyone standing around, as we can also see that there's the sounds of a large firefight. We don't actually get to see it on the film. But once again, showing us the severe situation that's still continuing to rack the areas of Dagestan, Ingushetia, Chechnya, and other Caucasus mountain regions that are within the southern area of Russia. But beyond that, we've also been able to hear that not only is the Russian southern regions near to the Russian Don and the major mountains of the Caucasus once again going into instability, but around the area of Sevastopol and Crimea, we've also been able to hear something that is wildly shocking, as the Russians have officially canceled the first Victory Day parade of this year completely. The Victory Day parade inside of Sevastopol, which has been held for multiple years on end at this point, has now been officially declared canceled inside of Sevastopol due to security concerns, according to the Russian Federation's government. This is starting to show us that the Russian Federation has a strong belief this year that the Ukrainians may actually attempt to directly attack and wipe out any Russian armed forces that attend any Victory Day parades. We may see in the end that the only Victory Day parades throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation will be held inside of Moscow and St. Petersburg only, and we may even see that the St. Petersburg parade is also heavily curtailed in size or even completely, and the Moscow Victory Day parade may be the only one to actually run this year. We're not entirely sure on that, and it still seems that the actual fate of the Victory Day parade might be up in the air at this moment. We still don't know how many foreign dignitaries and foreign leaders are going to be attending this military parade, and not only that, it continues to seem that the Russian Federation is becoming more and more scared about the security aspect of all of these events happening at the same time and not really being able to provide any substantive defense for any of them whatsoever. But with that, that is all of the news that we have today. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to comment down in the description below. And if you made it to this point in the stream right now and you would like to let us know in the comment section that you have, make sure to put a comment in the description below and just put Israel. Just put ISREAL in the description below to let us know that you made it to this point, considering that Israel and their airstrikes on western Yemen are pretty much the major piece of news for the day. But still, a major thanks to all of y'all so much once again for watching, and if you would like to like, comment, and subscribe, but you want to do more for the channel, which you don't have to, you can click on the link in the description below, which will take you to our Patreon. I've got to give a massive thanks to everyone who is currently on Patreon right now and supporting this channel, because all of those folks continue to make this channel possible for me and Enforcer Matt to run each and every single day. It is only through direct viewer support that we are able to make this channel a reality, and that's why we give you all such a massive thanks and a round of applause to all the folks who are currently on Patreon and supporting this channel, because you never had to, but nevertheless you are making this entire channel possible for millions of people every single month. And so, once again, a huge thanks to all of y'all for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.